Welcome back to the Brothers Mahoney. This is Michael,
And I am James.
and today we are discussing the first episode of Series 2 of the revival, being NuWho, which initially aired back on April 15th, 2006, almost 20 years ago. Good times. And this is an episode I've not seen in some time. To be honest, there's only like one scene that matters, and yeah, that's pretty much it. But as for the plot, the Doctor and Rose arrive on NuWho, meeting both old friends and old enemies in a hospital which can cure every disease. The cures, however, come at a terrible cost. And I think the terrible cost might be the CGI, but we'll talk about that.
That is certainly a very terrible cast indeed in this episode.
So, as far as important performances, we of course have the 10th Doctor played by David Tennant. His, I guess, second outing after the Christmas invasion, which he didn't do much until like the last 25 minutes.
But what he did do was glorious.
Well, you're not wrong. He made that one hell of an introduction. Then we have Billie Piper as Rose. We have the return of Cassandra, played by Zoe Wanamaker, who was, of course, back in episode 2 of the last season, The End of the World. We have Anna Hope playing Novus Haim, one of the cat nurses of this hospital. And even though they don't do anything, we technically do see both Mickey and Jackie for like 3 seconds at the beginning as Rose is about to take off the Doctor again. Of course, being Nola Clark and Camila Kaduri. And I guess before we jump into the episode proper, we should briefly mention and explain the Tardisodes.
So we mentioned this in the Christmas Invasion episode, but as a recap, the Tardisodes were these things that existed during the second stage of the revival of Doctor Who. They were these around 50 seconds to a minute video clip things that came out a week before the next Doctor Who episode as a kind of little prelude. Now, this is back in 2006. These were different times. This was a very different era. And these clips, the quality that exists in most of the ones you can find online is kind of atrocious. But these were actually made to be downloaded and viewed on old flip phones. Now, I'm sure maybe some listeners maybe never owned a flip phone in their life, so they don't know why that's such a big deal. But let me tell you, the difference between a flip phone and even the very first iPhone is about 2 billion years. It's a different type of animal, some would say.
Yeah, and you're not wrong. And I do think these have a lot of charm to them. It's one of those small parts of Doctor Who history that a lot of people may not remember. Like, there might have been an interesting thing back in the day. I'm not sure how many people received these each week. I have no idea that actually, you know what, I doubt the BBC even has that information.
They might not have it anymore, but it doesn't help anything that the BBC didn't even put these on the season DVD release. So these things, they exist on YouTube, and you can find them all on YouTube. In fact, some uploader has done upscaling to try to make them look the best as humanly possible. And there's a video of that on YouTube. Just look up Tardisode. It's probably the first one that will come up. And these 1 minute things, they didn't feature the Doctor, they didn't feature a companion. They just did something you set up what would see next week. You would subscribe to Doctor Who BBC on their tax service. I think it was even maybe a paid subscription, at least at first. And then you'd get this sent to you where you download on your phone and you'd view it there. It's so archaic thinking about it nowadays.
Yeah, it's just like a little taste of the episode to come. And this one, like James said, is just about 40, 50 seconds. It's like a little brochure of the hospital done by the nurses who work there, just showing off the facilities and saying, what's the quote, come to NuWho and be cured, because they have a thing where they can try to cure any disease. And pretty much all it is showing off the hospital, come to NuWho, be cured, and then you hear a scream, and then a frightened face as the nurse looks into the camera. And that is Tardisode 1.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, there were some of these Tardisodes that are actually, I think, useful to see. This is not really one of them. Except, for example, the Tardisode before the Impossible Planet Saint Pit episode. At the very least, the very first one is actually useful information.
No, that's sad. I do think it's a sort of a hammy charm to it. It's just fun. It's horrible, but it's fun.
It's terrible, yes, but great, to quote our homeboy Alvando. And for the record, this Tardisode 1 came out April 4th, 2006, and was written by Gareth Roberts. And by the way, the director of, I think, most of the Tardisodes, a Ashley Way, later went on to direct whole episodes during the Moffat era. And obviously, Roberts had written books in the past. He'll go on to write Torchwood episodes and Sarah Jane Adventures episodes and Doctor Who episodes in the future. So it's not like these were these fan-made monstrosities. These were actually produced by the BBC. In fact, this Tardisode was the very first BBC production related to Doctor Who to not feature the Doctor or a companion since Mission to the Unknown way back in 1965. So these things do have a place in history, but it's a place in history a lot of people aren't going to know about because they, for some reason, and I really don't know why, weren't included on the complete Series 2 DVD release.
Maybe it's just one of the things where it's just too difficult for them to upscale them themselves, and they just didn't want to put something of this poor quality out on an official DVD. Because it's not like it would have taken that much space either.
Yeah, it's literally 13 minutes of DVD space.
Yeah, but it's interesting. It's something, and like I said, it's like it just gives a little taste of what you're going to see in New Earth proper. So we'll just be talking about them briefly for each episode that we talk about in Series 2. So you have that to look forward to.
And we keep a list of what writers we have talked about stories of, and these Tardisodes, for such little effort, are going to get Gareth Roberts 13 credits on our list. So that has to count for something, because he is in fact the writer for all of these. So I guess go Roberts, which for the record is the only time I'll say that, because we're not going to talk about it. I know very well why he doesn't do Doctor Who things anymore, and why the fandom doesn't like him.
Well, some of the fandom. There's unfortunately some of the fandom that I imagine will quite like him. And yeah, but like James said, we're not going to get into that right now.
We will happily say we support trans rights, though, unequivocally.
So this episode starts out, like I said, with both Mickey and Jackie saying goodbye to Rose as she and the Doctor get ready to go off on some new adventures. And it's not clear to me how long after the Christmas invasion this is supposed to take place. I can't remember if it was particularly snowy in the Christmas invasion or not, but this doesn't really look like winter to me. It might be spring, but it doesn't look like winter.
Yeah, we saw at the end of the Christmas invasion, Rose was so happy because it was snowing, but the Doctor says, "Oh, that's just atmospheric ash from the ships."
He's what we call a buzzkill.
He is. I think Rose said something actually to the exact nature. Yeah, so apparently, and again, we do not have unlimited time. We've mentioned this in previous episodes. For the episode commentary, David Tennant points out that the TARDIS is in a different place than where we last saw it in the Christmas invasion. So he surmises, the actor, that perhaps the Doctor went on many advances during this time. Oh, he just moved the TARDIS out of the way, and he just stayed or hung around Rose, Tyler, and Jackie and Mickey for a small bit of the holidays until they moved down, so they would be able to spend time with the family.
I'll say that's a heartwarming idea, but I don't think it's in the Doctor's nature.
Well, there's a reason you said there's an either-or thing. I agree that, see, this Doctor, I could almost buy it. This isn't Matt Smith. Matt Smith's Doctor would not be able to do this. I could see this Doctor being able to settle down for a bit, especially under the circumstances of him having just regenerated, Rose going through the traumatic things, and Earth going through the traumatic thing they did in the Christmas invasion. If I had to, I could buy it. But in fact, we talked recently about the betrothal of Santa, which took place in between the Christmas invasion, according to the Doctor Who timeline on the TARDIS Wiki, and this episode. So at least timeline-wise, things happen in between. But it is almost a nice thought.
Yeah, and once Rose says goodbye to both Mickey and Jackie, the Doctor takes her to New Earth, which sort of sets this episode up as sort of like a sequel, in a way, to The End of the World, because they go to the year 5,023,000,023, which is shortly after the empty Earth gets destroyed by solar flares, which of course we see in The End of the World. And after that happened, there was sort of a nostalgia toward Earth. They found another planet, named it New Earth, and humans started coming back to this new planet, sort of setting it up like the Earth used to be. And they go to New York City, which is more like new times 13 New York City, but you get the point. And it's a nice place. The Doctor and Rose just sort of relax in the grass for a bit. Now, the Doctor has other reasons for being here. He got a message on his psychic paper. Now, it never as far as I'm concerned, enough of technically says who sent that message. I think we can assume it's one of the returning characters, being in this instance the face of Ball, who we saw briefly in the End of the World, but we didn't really see much of him. He stands out, don't get me wrong, but he didn't really have a lot to do in that one. In this one, we do get more of the lore that surrounds him, which I think is nice.
Yeah, let's just say you'll be able to pick him out of a lineup.
You ate Lan. And speaking of others you might be able to pick out of a lineup, we also have the return from the same episode as the Face of Ball. We have the return of Cassandra. And she immediately recognizes Rose. She has those little spider robots they had in that one. She immediately recognizes Rose and doesn't much care that she's around. She also doesn't care for the fact that the doctor apparently got a facelift, causing him somewhat hypocritical, but there you are.
That was a pretty funny line. I think she was more amusing in the End of the World than she was in this one. But she still got some gold jingles in every now and then.
Yeah, and it's one of those stories where the doctor's story and Rose's story slightly diverge for a bit. Once the doctor and Rose get to the hospital, and like I said, the doctor has a message on a psychic paper come to Ward 26 or what have you. So they get sort of separated going on the elevators. Doctor goes up, Rose goes down. Doctor meets, as I said, the face of Paul, who is apparently dying of one of the few things the hospital cannot cure, being old age. There are rumors that he is millions of years old, which, while the nurses say they don't believe, these people are, I'm going to say they're religious. It doesn't technically say they're religious. They are called the Sisters of Plantitude. I'm going to assume it's like a non-type thing. And it mentions that they took vows. So it may not necessarily be anything religious in nature, but I'm just going to say it is.
There was at one point where you see one of the hard nurses or one of the hard matrons call out to one of their deities.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I only bring this up, well, I'll bring it up later anyway, but I bring it up now because the idea of some life form living millions of years. I mean, if you're religious, you can believe anything, so I don't see why not believe that. And there's rumors surrounding the face of Ball, legends of his past and what he can do. And apparently, one story states that just before he dies, he shall, quote, impart his great secret. And who shall he impart it upon? It's sad that he'll talk to a wanderer, to the man without a home, the lonely god, which I thought was a nice piece of dialogue right there. And hey, it sounds quite a bit like the Doctor. He seems like a lonely god. I can buy it.
Yeah, see, the great thing is a good actor for Doctor Who would be able to hear this being said and react in basically the same way David Tennant did. You'd see the age that they are in their eyes as they take this knowledge in. Matt Smith would have been great with this scene. Christopher Eccleston would have been great with this scene. Capaldi, like all of these doctors, anybody who's played the Doctor, this is a great scene to say, hey, let's see how you react to this line. Let's see you act this. You could do much worse than use a scene like this and see how they're able to act out being told this information.
And the Doctor then gets sort of engrossed in the idea that, hey, when they say they can cure anything, apparently it's true because before meeting the face of Bo again, he sees a couple people with diseases that pretty much should be the end of their lives. But then he sees that, oh, hey, these people are actually healing. They're actually getting better, and this hospital at this time should not have those capabilities. So it's a mystery that the Doctor, as you can imagine, very much wants to solve. And while that's going on, Rose was sort of diverted down into the basement. Cassandra wants to use her body and sort of do like a body swap. Well, it's not so much a body swap because Rose doesn't get swapped into Cassandra's body, such as the body is, but sort of inserts her consciousness into Rose's body. And she also has, I don't just say noble aspirations, but she does know that the Sisters of Plantitude are hiding something. Now she wants to uncover what it is just so she can blackmail the Sisters. On a side note, such a bad plan. She wants to try to blackmail the Sisters so she can get some money. I guess live life in luxury with a human body again, and that's what she wants in life. She has like this assistant who's like a clone, so it doesn't really matter. I think its name was Chip. And well, given Cassandra's personality, you can imagine she doesn't treat it particularly well, and the clone's like devoted to her. It's yeah, so that thing's going on, and it's one of those situations where the Doctor, after meeting up with Rose again, can very quickly tell that something's off. To be fair, Cassandra doesn't make it difficult.
Yeah, she's doing a worse job than Clayface did impersonating Jim Gordon
Some
in
Gotham
Gotham.
reference for the win.
And to the 8 people who got that reference, well done. But yeah, no, she's using a terrible accent. It's awful. And trying to impersonate Rose. And it just doesn't hold up for longer than 2 seconds once the doctor actually sees Rose in person because she's holding herself differently a bit as a person. She's a couple more buttons of her blouse undone because, of course, Lady Cassandra has been, I don't know if you know how long, a very long time, just a flap of skin. She enjoys, as she quotes, having curves again. So,
Yeah, and I think it's also a fundamental misunderstanding of Rose and the Doctor's relationship to a point because she also kisses the Doctor, which I do sort of like the Doctor's quip afterward, still got it, which I thought was sort of funny. But I have to imagine to an extent she thought there was some type of more romantic relationship than what they actually had at that point in time, which is just another sign that, hey, this isn't quite the Rose that he knows.
well, she knew at the very least that Rose had feelings for the Doctor because she was able to at least skim the surface of Rose's mind.
Yeah,
So maybe she knew that there was anything going on, but she knew that Rose liked him, and she herself probably just wanted to try it anyway. Because when's the last time she had any connection like that?
probably with Chip, but yeah, which Royce implied earlier in some other mutant lines. But
I struck my mistress.
you can stop right there. And like I said, Rose's consciousness is still technically in her heart, but it's been sort of repressed. So it's one of the things where it's struggling for dominance. But the device used was something called a psychograph, which the Doctor immediately recognizes once he sees it as that most civilized planets have banned the use of this psychograph. And he's not particularly pleased with Cassandra, as you can imagine. I mean, he did pretty much try to kill her the first time or allow her to die in the first encounter, so he's not particularly happy that she's still around anyway. But he has bigger fish to fry as it is.
All big or cuts anyway.
Yeah, because the Sisters of Plantitude, well, they can cure any diseases from humans. The way they do it isn't exactly moral, in my view. What they do is they create a bunch of clones, and they. No, I don't think this works, and James can jump into this a little bit. But what they do, or at least what the episode says that they do, and it doesn't really make sense to me, they just eject the clones with every disease at once in order to derive a cure from that. Now, I don't see like, if you were to use one clone per one disease, that seems like it would be a better idea to me. They probably have thousands and thousands of these clone life forms made up, so I guess they can do what they want with them. I just don't see the logic necessarily behind how they get cures from like ejecting a single clone with like every disease at once.
Yeah, because you would think that would interfere with trying to find out what would exactly kill this one thing if they actually have 4,000 things wrong with them. Like, how do you know this is going to make them a quote unquote healthy human, as it were? Because these were basically humanoid clones. How do you know that it's going to make them healthy, this one thing, or trying to fix this one thing, when they have 10,000 other diseases roaming around inside of them?
Yeah, and this doesn't really pop up necessarily in this form in the episode, but I think it's worth mentioning, and it's why I brought up the religious aspect earlier. But because these are clone life forms, and the Sisters of Platitude, to some extent, are a religious order, they don't see these clones as real life. They see it more like equipment or a means to an end, or as the Doctor puts, guinea pigs, but they don't see them as actual life. They look at these creatures who sometimes regain consciousness. They even have a vocabulary.
One of the novices has even written a thesis on the idea that consciousness seems to go from one to the other. So they're aware on some extent that it's happening.
Yeah, and the sisters like look at these clones riddled with diseases, and they have no pity because they don't consider it life. And like I said, the episode itself doesn't touch on this, but I just think it. I think it just goes to show how some more religious people might view clones as, hey, because they were created in this way, they're not quote unquote real life.
They don't have a soul. No, it's kind of funny. I didn't take that at all from this episode because with the way that I saw it, since it didn't touch on the fact that they are a religious order in as explicit as you would perhaps think they would if they are a religious order, I saw it more of what the doctor said guinea pigs, where though these completely immoral scientists who want to help people, they want to cure these diseases, so yeah, they'll use guinea pigs, and we do animal testing today. Like this happens, it's just not on. Well, I'm going to say just not on humans, except we also know in the past that we've done magical experiments sanctioned by our government on the African American community, on the indigenous Native American community,
And not to
these
mention the prison population too.
the present population as well. These things have happened in our history. And even ignoring the United States, of course, the Nazis did experimentation. The Japanese during World War II did experimentation. Like, human experimentation, especially on quote unquote prisoners, is not the most uncommon thing. And in many ways, prisoners like that are also dehumanized for reasons one or another, much like these people, which this episode couple of times called the Floss, just because, again, they're completely dehumanized. They don't see them as people, the Sisters of Plantitude. They see them just as
Like a means to
something
an
to,
end type thing, to be honest.
yeah, just something to use. So they're just considered as a mass known as the Floss. And in some ways, this is kind of a precursor to something we see during the Matt Smith era, isn't it?
Yeah, there's the two-part of the Almost People the Rabble Flash, which was in the first half of what that been series 6.
Yeah, Series 6 of Matt Smith's Tanya.
That one featured a lot more on what quote unquote rights clones should have, and this one doesn't touch on it as much. At the end, we do see that the new life forms get forget how it phrased, but they're going to get some, ideally, some type of way to live after this. Because spoilers, everyone lives besides the ones who die, but hey, most people live.
I mean, they say that. I'm not as convinced. Like, that might be what the Doctor wants to happen. I have no doubt that's true. But let's be real. They could easily, as soon as the Doctor leaves, and it's not like they knew the Doctor had anything to do with this anyway, but once the Doctor leaves, they're going to have political debates about this. These people are going to really have representation. Who knows if they're actually going to be considered people? They could just be sent to live in the autonomous area.
Yeah, maybe New Earth doesn't need any Ood because they have these people.
Maybe they did become a slave race. They weren't just raised and bred in a lab their entire life. It's how do you say, and yeah, they have consciousness, but it's how do you say if the people, the politicians of New Earth, and by the way, I point out during this episode we meet a Duke of Manhattan. So who knows what type of politics New Earth has anyway. But who knows if these people are actually going to be considered people. In actuality, I wouldn't be surprised if they get thrown into an incinerator by the government 5 weeks later. I'm not saying it's the most likely, but it's not impossible either.
Yeah, and as you can imagine, when the Doctor discovers the nature of these clones and why they're being used, he's not particularly pleased about it. As he has a conversation with Navis Haim, he says that the people, and they're like in these, to me it sort of looked like a Matrix type thing. It's like, and I have to say the CGI didn't look great, but we see rows and rows and rows of just people in these little cylinder type things. And he's saying that, hey, these people are alive, and Haim's talking about other people they save by deriving cures. And the Doctor replies that if the people who get the cures live because of this, then life is fundamentally worthless. To which Haim asks, well, who are you to decide that? And then this is a quote that I will quote verbatim. I'm the Doctor, and if you don't like it, if you want to take it to a higher authority, then there isn't one. It stops with me. That's like some Time Lord Victorious, I am your god type thing, and I appreciate that.
Yet Time Lord Victorious touch already and it's touch now. Surprise.
Like,
In
there were,
new
there were elements of that in the end of the world when the Doctor just told Cassandra, like, hey, go die, bruh.
which we pointed out then is a kind of actually hypocritical about how life has an and this is it for you.
That's
When
easy for him
he's
to say. Like,
Yeah, when he's part of his pieces where life almost doesn't have an and. So yeah, that's great to say, and I
it's not even,
understand that what he was doing in that point was something that one should do, but
and though the Doctor doesn't know this, of course, that's not even part of the species, technically. It's part of another species. So, it's not even the natural Gallifreyan.
I do wonder if any writer's going to want to tackle that years down the road. They try to actually go into that type of thing, like
I
the
imagine
origins of our species. The Doctor is.
I imagine they will once the heat dies down a bit. I think it will still take a bit, but there are things that could be done that could theoretically be interesting. But I guess we'll see if it happens. But the idea that the Doctor considers himself the highest authority, I do find that I don't necessarily know if he's. It's sort of an interesting case because I don't necessarily think he's wrong, but he's also certainly not right. So it's just sort of fun.
Yeah, he's not the government. Like, and I get that you would want to consider the government a higher authority either, but I'm sure there's some type of galactic council who might want to make rulings on things. And
Yeah.
I
Well,
don't know, he
how about the how do they call the cascade, the Medusa cascade.
The Shadow Proclamation.
Oh, that's what. Yeah, Shadow Proclamation.
I mean, yeah, the Doctor just goes to all these places. He makes his moral declarations, and yes, usually they'll go on more declarations, unless you're the Jodie Whittaker Doctor.
I was going to say the goal for now. Just give it a couple seasons.
Well, yes, and then he just goes off after making his declarations and deciding how he thinks things should be. And I get that there's more to it than that, and it's not just that, but that does happen. So I don't know, it's amusing. Like the sister was trying to give a Howard Soul. This was Navis Haim talking before she called in her superiors, trying to give the Howard Soul, saying humans right now out there, they came to this planet in droves, they brought all the diseases, we called it cope, we wanted to help them, and this is the best we could come up with, and we did try other things. But not a single bit of that moved the Doctor, because what he was seeing at that point in time was horrific, and it was horrific.
I also think the Doctor has a pretty absolute morality to him too. Like, I don't think anything that could be said would necessarily turn the Doctor on this specific issue.
No, you're absolutely right. Once he decides something's wrong, it would probably take a lot to change his opinion. And in a case like this, I don't think that opinion's changing.
And this episode, from that point on, in my personal opinion, it becomes a bit less interesting because this is around the time where the Doctor discovers that Cassandra has sort of returned and is inhabiting Rose's body. At first, he thinks his sisters had something to do with it because he asks him, "Hey, what did you do with Rose?" And Rose is just standing next to him. To be honest, it didn't look like she cared particularly about being found out because she, say whatever else you want about Cassandra, she's probably not necessarily an idiot. So she probably knew that the Doctor knew something wasn't right.
If she thought she was going to be able to fool the Doctor for any longer than a couple of hours just to get her out of the position she was in, then she would be an idiot. But
She would be sorely mistaken.
Yeah, we don't get an indication what type of long goal she is planning, how long she was expecting to be able to fool the Doctor. I would agree with Michael that she couldn't have thinking it was going to be for very long.
Yeah, and it's around this time that Cassandra then attempts to blackmail the sisters, and like I said, it's not a good plan, especially not the way she does it. And it doesn't work, big shock. And then what she does is plan B and just starts unleashing a couple of these infected clones. And it's not necessarily like a zombie movie, but you have a bunch of infected people walking around. If they touch you, you get infected. And to be honest, saying it right now, it sounds cooler than what we actually see, in my opinion. Because we primarily just follow the Doctor and Rose's body. Of course, it's primarily Cassandra as they try to figure out how to deal with the situation. There's a lot of the Doctor telling Cassandra, "Hey, leave Rose's body," and at one point, Cassandra moves from Rose's body into the Doctor's body. And I mean, I have to say, those elements, like the whole taking Rose's body and the whole taking the Doctor's body, those elements interest me the least, just because I'm not particularly wild about Cassandra as a character and her excitement about being in different bodies. Just that excitement she has doesn't translate over to me. I can say it that way.
Yeah, part of the problem is that this episode was written to be a little more comedic. There were moments of levity that Doctor Who doesn't usually do, with Howard cuts to cut off a coarse word. And of course, Cassandra's more, I'll just say, interest in the sexuality that she has now that she didn't have as a flap of skin. So, I don't know, there were actually, in some ways, it feels like some pre-tortured season 1 stuff, because that goes overboard with all the sexual stuff. Part of it feels a little out of place.
Yeah, I have to imagine kids watching this back in 2006. I mean, some of this probably wasn't like immediately obvious to them, but yeah, there's just some elements here that just don't feel quite what you would expect, at least after watching the first series of the revival. And that doesn't make it bad. It just makes it. Sometimes the humor just doesn't work for me. It's just not necessarily my type of thing. I mean, like some of it might be funny, but I actually think it's not the most engrossing elements of this story.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit jarring from what one might be used to from when you think about David Tennant as the 10th Doctor. This story might not be all it as a season opener.
And this is something that James has mentioned in the past, that very rarely do special effects make a big difference, and I don't think it necessarily makes a big difference in this story either, but it's pretty clear that this episode's quite dated. Like, the CGI, especially for the elevator scenes, it just looks, from the modern eye, it looks really rough. Like, it doesn't look good, and I don't know if that could even be upscaled. It just isn't the type of thing that's pleasing to the senses.
Yeah, no, I've said in a lot of past episodes that I don't really care about CGI at all. I just care about the story. But here, the story's not the most interesting past the 20-minute mark, 25-minute mark. And the way that the Doctor cures everybody, I think is absurd.
Yeah, it uses a bunch of what are those even called? I was going to say saline bags. Saline's a thing in the bag, but those medical bags, and he uses them. He like brings a bunch together and like sprays them over some of these infected clones, and the clones then spread it out to the other people, effectively curing. I'd say most of them. I mean, I don't know how they got to other floors. It would take a while. That process is not immediate, and there were literally thousands of these things. So there's still a lot of work to do after the immediate ones were cured. But the idea that you can just mix up a bunch of cures for different diseases and then quote unquote cure everything, it seems awfully convenient. Like
It seemed convenient and it looked very cheap.
yeah, like this is this arguably a similar idea used in The Empty Chair, the Dr. Dances, but one, it's done in a hell of a lot better way. It makes more sense, and I actually think there's some emotion behind that. Where I don't feel that here. I just don't feel it.
Like, yeah, the Doctor's very happy that there's this new life. And that's great. I'm happy he's happy in this life that he helped come to a more full potential, to not live as prisoners, to not live as lab rats, basically. But again, these people have lived as lab rats for their entire life. And it's how do you criticize them? But they're not the most expressive people. I don't think we see any of them talk. Maybe a couple of them say thank you, but I don't know. It's Tennant has to carry basically out the emotion himself. And as Michael said, the way that the Dr. Dances deals with this is a hell of a lot better than the way this one deals with it. And I get that they're going for different things, but nonetheless, that beats this like with a crowbar. This is basically Jason Todd.
Oh snap! Yeah, and the end of the episode, we actually hear that the Sisters of Plantitude were all arrested. All the staff of the hospital were arrested, so that's nice to see. It'd be interesting to see some follow up on that actually, some court cases and the like. But we also follow up on what happens with both the Face of Bo and Cassandra. For the Face of Bo, he speaks briefly with the doctor, saying, and by the way, he was dying early. He seems fine now. I think what was his line? Oh, there's better things to do than die.
Like maybe he shouldn't talk to Cassandra either, because both him and the Doctor seem to just decide if they get to live or not.
Yeah. And he states that he's going to meet the doctor one more time at the time of his death and then impart to him a secret. And then he teleports away. And
Yeah, and the Doctor amusingly says, "Well, that's textbook animatic," which is funny. So I just enjoyed that. So we have the Face of War in the future to look forward to.
yeah, and of course, as I'm sure everyone here knows, that happens in season 3 in Gridlock. So we have a bit of time before we get there.
Yeah, with the return of the most important classic Who alien species.
You are not wrong, and we will talk about that at length, shall we say. And that's fun. It sets up a potential mystery later on. Yeah, and as for Cassandra, during the events of the episode, there's a scene in which she transfers bodies between Rose and the Doctor multiple times because, well, they need the Doctor's expertise to survive, but the Doctor refuses to actually help unless she leaves Rose's body. At one point, she actually goes into the body of one of these infected clones. And when she comes back, she sounds different, like she experienced something that she's never felt before. Like, well, I guess empathy or compassion, which is something that the wealthy often lack. And it's unclear to me how deeply that impacted her, but it certainly impacted her a little bit. I mean, even toward the end, she is still willing to take over the body of her servant and use that. So maybe in the moment it meant more to her than it did toward the end. But then the servant's body, which is like we said, a clone, it's dying anyway. So what the doctor does, and on a side note, even though there's some other elements of the episode that might be worth seeing, the ending of this one is literally the only scene I generally remember of the episode. In which case, the doctor brings back Cassandra in the body of Chip to a party that she once attended, and then she dies at the party again in Chip's body after telling herself, human-looking Cassandra, that hey, you're beautiful. I'm not sure why you want to boost your own vanity. That seems like not the best way to go about it. But you do
Well,
see that Cassandra cares about this random guy as he's dying. So I generally do like that finale.
yeah, there is an interesting thing, and it's not one I've thought about before watching this, but it's kind of like one of those paradoxes. because she had previously mentioned that was the last night anybody called her beautiful. And then we see that the person who called her beautiful was herself. So it's just kind of interesting thing about thinking about how that works out. And it's one of those things that, like, at the end of the day, doesn't really matter. It's a nice way to end the episode. The doctor just walks his own. Apparently, there was a cut line from the doctor. I forget if we know exactly what it's going to say. There's going to be a little more to that with the doctor mentions the people who Cassandra had killed in the past. Because she, in some ways, did get off easy. Because the doctor had wanted her to stand trial in New York. When sad she just gets to come here and die. So there is that, and I'm sure the doctor's not all happy about how things went out. But it's a nice ending to an episode that perhaps you would expect an ending as nice as that was, from what we had just seen in the last 20 minutes.
Yeah, like, because a lot of it's just generic, or it seems to me like generic zombie-esque type stuff. It's just not that interesting, and then you throw in the whole body swapping thing. Again, to me, not that interesting. And then we get an ending that I would go as far to say it's emotional. I don't particularly think it is, but you could argue, or certainly for some people, it would be. I think it's certainly a better ending than it was like middle section. But I also know that you had some interesting and random notes also you wanted to bring up.
Yeah, and I'll just go through these quickly. These are just random things that I found online, so no credit to myself. Although some of these we really should have thought of ourselves. But this is actually the very first story of the revival series of Doctor Who to take place on an actual alien planet, because the entire first series and Christmas Invasion took place on either Earth, present day, Earth in the past, Earth in the future, or on a satellite around Earth. It's in many ways his second Earth out after his time as the Third Doctor. So, welcome to the first new planet of NuWho, being New Earth. Very inspiring.
That's what we call creativity, right there.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. Well done, Rusty Davies. And I know it's because of budget reasons, so I'm not knocking on it too hard. I get the reasons behind it, but it is hilarious that the first non-Earth planet is just New Earth. That's great. This is also the first time we see the 10th Doctor with his iconic line talking to one of these clones after he first discovers them, saying that I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. And he does this for the rest of his time as the 10th Doctor. It becomes
Yeah,
a very iconic line from him.
yeah, he just goes into an apology tour like Obama does, so it's okay.
Jesus Christ.
That's a nice reference that no one would know. Yeah, the Doctor's well known for this line. You see it in GIFs all the time, or GIFs. I forget the quote unquote correct way to pronounce it. But either way, he's well known for this. He says it all the time to all types of people, and we're going to point it out each time just to keep a counter going. So it's sort of amusing that the first time it happens is in an episode like this. That generally speaking, I don't know if it's the weakest of the season. It's probably not, because this is the same season that Lady has Fairhair in it. But it's among, in my opinion, one of the more forgettable episodes of the season.
Honestly, it's one of the more forgettable seasons of the series. I think there's a lot of little lower tier stories in this season, but we'll see as we go on. There is, if you're very interested in Novice Haim, very later on, there is the webcast out of Doctor Who Lockdown, which were these stories put out during the times of COVID. The Secret of Novice Haim, with the same actor, Anna Hope, portraying Novice Haim on her deathbed, with the Doctor, during his goodbye tour that we see a bit of in the end of time, goes and sees Novice Haim as he's dying, just to say goodbye and to help ease her passing. And it's only this 11-minute webcast thing, but I've seen, I think I saw it once, and it's actually a rather emotional bit of media. I think it's well worth the 11 minutes. You just take a look at this, especially if you enjoyed seeing Novice Haim here, and Novice Haim comes up again in Gridlock. Novice Haim also shows up in Big Finish. She is in a couple stories in the anthology Big Finish, Tales from New Earth, which came out in March 2018. This is one of those Big Finish things that I'm surprised exists. It feels so random, much like the Launch and Tyrion, and there were two of those. But Tales from New Earth, which just I think has 4 stories, well, featuring Tales from New Earth. We see Novice Haim in a couple of the stories. No idea if there's a third line between them, but hey, it exists. And if you want, Big Finish will be happy to sell it to you for probably $30 or so. And one last thing of interest, This, of course, is the Torchwood season of Doctor Who, but this episode has actually not a single mention of Torchwood. Now, it makes a lot of sense. This takes place on a completely alien planet, so there's no natural way I think they could throw Torchwood into it, but they bring Torchwood up in literally the impossible planet Sainton Pit, so they can fit it into other alien planets. They just apparently didn't want to do it this time. So this might very well be among the only episodes of Series 2 that doesn't use the word Torchwood, and maybe Fairhoe doesn't, but we'll keep our eye on that as the series progresses.
Yeah, and some of those references can be quick and sometimes hard to catch, but I'm hoping that with the two of us, we're smart lads. We can see what happens.
Yes, we can, and before we finish off, a quick look at the timeline. As listeners know, the TARDIS Wiki has a personal timeline for each Doctor, including the extensive extended media, ranging from the comic books, comic strips, Big Finish and BBC audio, the multiple book ranges, and everything in between. Doctor Who canon, insofar as it actually has one, is a jumbled mess and has been forever. So I just like to see where this choice we're discussing fit into the universe as a whole, as continuity in the narrative timeline has always been of interest to me. And for this one, it's kind of interesting. Right before this episode is a 1 page, maybe it's 2 pages, backup untitled comedy story from Doctor Who, the 10th Doctor, Year 3, Issue 2. So that's at least 2 colons. And
It's a mouthful and a half.
it really is. That came out February 2017. If I'm not mistaken, we have a scan of it on my computer. So I think it's the Doctor, of course, the 10th Doctor, and Rose meeting some old hands in a mall on Earth or something like that. These backup comedy things were kind of popular during these Doctor Who series, and the 11th Doctor had this series. These were published by Titan, by the way. The 12th Doctor had the series during this time. The 9th Doctor even had a 5-issue series. And in all of these, most of them included at the end just a 1 or 2 page comedy story. So there you go. Those are kind of on the timeline. And that happened right before. Right after this is very simple. It's just the next episode, Tooth and Claw, which we'll be talking about in a bit. But it's not what we'll be talking about next.
That is indeed true. And before we reveal that information, which I imagine people are waiting for, final thoughts on the episode. It's okay. Like, as a season opener, this is nowhere near as good as Rose was. It's nowhere near as engaging as Rose was. I don't think it's as interesting. There are some elements here that have potential, but overall, save like a couple ideas. It's not something that has aged particularly well. And like James said, series to us a whole is somewhat of a weakest season anyway. So this one, I think for a good reason, is somewhat forgettable. Like, yeah, you get the face of ball. Cassandra's not my favorite villain of the Revival series, but you get that too. But otherwise, it's just not really a ton here.
Well, you could say it's at least indicative of the series as a whole.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, you could say it starts with the consistency, but certainly, I think thinking about episodes coming up, this is among the weaker ones, especially like in the first half of the season. So it's unfortunate, but hey, at least they got the weakest one done with and moved on from there.
Indeed, and my views are much the same. This is an episode that you'll want to rewatch while doing a series rewatch, but you're probably not going to go out of your way to watch it. Like, I could go out of my way to watch a lot of things from series 4, but I'm not, in a normal series of events, I'm not going to say, you know what, I need New Earth today. That's not going to happen. I can promise it has to happen before, and I don't think it's going to happen in the future. So it's okay with what it wanted to do, but I'll be very honest, the fact that this has above a 7 on IMDb surprises the hell out of me. I'd expect this to a bust of like a 6.9, but it has
Yeah,
like a 7.3.
Yeah, it's just made, and like I said, it's not without merit, but it's not the most interesting thing out there. But of course, that's just our thoughts. If you have particularly strong feelings toward this one, please let us know either down below here on YouTube, or you could also reach out on Twitter. But before we head out, coming out next, we have the somewhat interesting Invasion of the Dialects, which is the first story in the first, I guess, season or series. I'm not sure the best phrase, but in the first season of Dialect Empire by Big Finish. And we had previously talked about the Genocide Machine, the Apocalypse Element, and the Muted Phase, which was a 7th Doctor story, a 6th Doctor story, and a 5th Doctor story. all of them in the Big Finish main range, all of them sort of like a Dalek trilogy leading to this moment.
Although, to be fair, the mutant face has actually very little connection besides
Yeah, it really,
perhaps.
yeah, maybe that time thing, yeah, it's just fact, or the disease, yeah.
I mean, there's even like a body, not body swap, but something like that too.
Yeah,
That could, that could come into play.
yeah, I suspect that probably will. But point being that this is I guess a combination of that story arc they had going. So we finally get some Dalek Empire. I think you said these are all like what, an hour a piece per episode, and I believe each. Well, I can say at least for the first season, as it were, that I think there's 4 episodes, and I imagine this were like 4 seasons total.
Yes, and the very interesting thing about the fourth season, and it's going to be a while till we get there, but the fourth season, one of the main cast members is voiced by Noel Clarke.
Yeah, and unfortunately, Noel Clarke is one of those people who has fallen from grace, but it's still one of those voices I think that would be interesting to hear in like a Big Finish capacity.
Yeah, no, I'm quite looking forward in some ways to Invasion of the Daleks. Certainly, the Daleks are always good fun, very joyful creatures, very happy lads you get to know. And I'm sure the Earth will benefit from their presence.
Yeah, and the fact that these are only about like an hour a piece as opposed to like, I don't know, the hour, 40 minutes, sometimes 2 hours, 20 minutes that some of the Big Finish main release has been, should be a lot more digestible too. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Should be fun. I'm not quite sure what to expect. I feel like listening to an hour of Daleks speaking to each other might get a bit old, but I know there's going to be human revolution fighting type characters. At least I'm assuming that's what it's going to primarily focus on. I actually don't know, but I am interested to get to it. But yeah, next up, Invasion of the Daleks. So be there or be exterminated, as the kids say.
Honestly, be there and be exterminated. I mean, this is the Daleks.
You ain't lying. But yeah, that's how we've got. Any last thoughts on New Earth?
No, I have no thoughts on this one. Looking forward to the Daleks, though. Always good fun.
Indeed. So we'll catch you next time. As always, we have been the Brothers Mahoney. This is Michael.
And I've been James.
Indeed. Thanks for listening. Have yourself a pleasant day.